Welcome to Keep This in Mind, brought to you by SpectHealth.com. I am David A. Specht. I know the show's late today, but it's late for a very, very good reason. I have my new friend, Kale Houser from Kale Houser Leadership Consulting. And you may not know him, but I was introduced to him a few weeks back, and we have really connected in our leadership strategies and some of our leadership philosophies. And since this is Keep This in Mind, I really want to get into about the mindset of a leader. And I couldn't think of anybody better to go into this with than Kale. And come to find out, we both like to fly high with the Air Force. And
Yes.
there may be a few years of distance between our times of serving, but Kel was an Air Force officer. He also did a stint in the Air National Guard, and he realized that the way that leadership is handled today is in flux. And so I really wanted to bring him on so that he and I could have a discussion about how leadership is changing and how we as leaders need to change, even if the principles don't. So, Kale, welcome to the show.
Mr. David, thank you so much. I am pleased and honored when you sent me the invitation to come on. I was tickled pink, so I'm really excited about this morning. And I appreciate you. I appreciate all the things that you're doing with your show and just tackling all those kinds of mindset things, because that's really what everything comes down to, is your mind and what you're telling yourself, what you can and can't do. So thank you for
Absolutely.
having me.
And you know, as John Maxwell said, everything rises and falls on leadership. I kind of want you to dive in, because one of the things that I read in your bio on your website is your disenfranchisement, if that's a word,
Yeah.
with the way leadership, that the way leadership in your military service was just kind of playing out, and you're like, you know what, I've got to do something. I've got to step. Kind of walk us through what led you to the need to become a leadership consultant.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'll try not to take our entire time up with just my backstory, but just to give a little bit of context. I joined the Air Force kind of late in 2003. I was a little bit older. I was the oldest person in my basic training class. I was the oldest person in my officer training class. I enlisted first and then commissioned a couple years later. But in the so you know, as you read in my bio, I did 16 years active duty and then a year in the Guard. That was all kind of right at the pandemic time, and the world went crazy. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this anymore. So we went our separate ways. But yeah, a large part of it, the first 10 years of my career, man, I had such a blast. I had basically no responsibility. I was, younger in rank and all those kinds of things. And then as I, gained rank and gained responsibility, I can, of that 17 years, I can count on one hand, like the number of people that I served under that I would consider actual leaders. Like they cared about their people more than just, marking the box or getting their own next promotion. And it was, I think disenfranchisement is a great word for it, because that was one of those things. I steadily started waking up. I'm going, man, I've been through all this leadership training. The military is known. They have this common perception of, oh, they create great leaders. They're the number one leader producer, entity in the United States. And to a degree, there are examples of that. We can all think of phenomenal military leaders, the four-star generals during our past wars, and even, more recent years, Mattis and Powell and all those types of guys and gals that are coming out. But the reality is the military creates great commanders. And that's what all their training is for. They call it leadership training. Even our airmen go to airman leadership school before they become an NCO and get put in charge of other younger troops. But the reality is you're being taught how to be a supervisor, how to be a manager, and how to be a commander, and not necessarily a leader. And that's where the massive disconnect was. And like I said, as I started to gain rank and get my eyes opened up to a little bit more of the political side of the military, especially in the Air Force. I can't speak for other branches, but I know from friends and acquaintances that it's similar to varying degrees, and certainly depending on your career field. But yeah, there was this kind of disconnect of going, holy smokes, is this what I want to do? Because I actually cared about the men and women that served with me. I actually cared about their careers. I actually cared about their well-being and their families and all the things that go into making somebody a productive member of your team. So it was really eye-opening, and unfortunately something that ultimately couldn't reconcile between the two of us.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I love how you said there's a difference between a leader and a commander,
Yeah, big
because
time.
really that's, in the civilian world, it would be the difference between a leader and a manager, and that's a discussion that we've had as well. The commanders really really understand the structure, and they hold fast to the structure.
Yeah,
And a commander can be a great leader, but
yeah,
it's not automatic.
right,
Um,
definitely.
and one of the things that I learned post military, and actually one of the biggest lessons that, let me back up for a second. I want your take on this.
Hmm.
One of the biggest lessons that I learned in leadership from the military that I don't think enough people translate to today was praise in public, criticize in private.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
that is
and
a very key principle, certainly.
yes, and I think so many times, especially in what I would consider structure heavy organizations, franchises come to mind. They lack that. They lack that discerning of, I've got to take this employee off to the side to talk to them about a shortcoming, as
Right.
opposed to blowing up on the. I've seen it
Yeah.
constantly in like coffee houses. They get overwhelmed. Somebody's not really doing what they're supposed to do, and all of a sudden you see a leader, manager, just
Right.
blessing out the baristas, that aren't stepping to. What do you say about that?
It's really interesting that you bring that up with the especially the franchise model, because I think you find this, and this isn't all encompassing, but I think you find that generally in workplace environments that have strong SOPs, they have strong processes for how they do their thing, how they create their widgets, how they produce their product to the marketplace. It's very process driven. And you're right, when people, they only see like, well, this is what the manual says, right? This is step one, step two, step three, step four. Why are you skipping step three? And they don't know how to handle that. And they kind of forget that, yes, there's a manual, and sometimes, we forget. Sometimes, we just got an offender bender on the way to work. Sometimes we've got a sick relative. Like, there's all kinds of things, just because we're human and we live in a civilization right now that, interacts with other humans, that come into that process, and you lose that. And because you're solely relying, like a manager would, on just the steps A, B, C, D, E, and F to get you through your day, versus any actual, what we would consider leadership skills to help people along in their journey. What are their goals? What are their desires? What are their fears? How do they learn? How are they not understanding, this processes, and what caused them to miss that step, right? Instead of just like freaking out in the moment. And you're right. And it was very similar in the military too. There's a mission to be done, and these are the tasks we need to do to get the mission done. Damn, I forget my language, but damn all else, and whatever's going on in your life, the mission must be done, kind of thing. It's like, well, for the most part, we're not kicking down doors in Fallujah here anymore, especially in the Air Force. It's very corporate type of a mentality in nature. So there's definitely that, but they never got out of that mode, if that makes sense. That
Yes.
that deployment mentality of at all costs.
So let's talk to the leader, or even the manager of today.
Yeah,
The world changed 3 years ago, and as you said, things went crazy even in the military.
yeah.
What do you say to the manager, leader, or just leader in general, who did things a certain way up until this point, and now they're like, employees suck now. They don't want to work a full shift. They want to work 4 days. They're taking time off left and right. I don't know. I can't get the work done because they won't do the work. What do you say to that leader? What is what I don't know that there's a single answer, but what is one of the main priorities of understanding the world we're in now, and how to navigate leadership within an organization now?
Yeah, that's such a fantastic question, and an amazing struggle that I think especially young and small business owners are dealing with. Because, in 2020, they started competing with the US government, paying people to stay home. Like, how can you get people to come in to be a server in your restaurant, or, a beggar in your grocery store, all those types of jobs where the government's paying them more to stay home than what you could afford to pay them at the time. And you're right. Even though we're not necessarily in that mode anymore of mass unemployment benefits, to all these people, that mentality is sticking with people if they're not returning to the workforce. And those that are, I see it every day on my social media feeds, people complaining because, I obviously follow a lot of, business owners and entrepreneurs. They're complaining about those exact things of nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to, learn new skills. Nobody wants to be held accountable, blah, 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 right? The complaints just are never ending when that comes down to it. But the reality is, you're right. We are in an entirely different economy, entirely different social structure certainly in the United States right now, that you just cannot use the same tricks and tips and mentality that you used to have when all the, I don't know if power is the right word, but all the influence was on the side of the employers. That has completely shifted now to where most of the power, most of the influence is on the side of the employees on that staff because of just the things that we've gone through in the last couple of years. But the biggest tip I would give to people is really, well, the ones that didn't transition are pretty much out of business right now, right? Those are the businesses that folded, left and right throughout the pandemic. But the biggest thing I'd tell people is you really have to transition into being people focused. You have to transition into great, your product I'm sure is amazing. The processes of how you produce that product, how you interact with your marketplace and your industry, you have to have those things. But you must focus solely, not solely, but primarily on your people and how you create those teams and how you build that culture around your mission, your vision, the goals that you have for your business. Which is, I realize I'm not saying a magic fairy dust wand, one trick pony type of thing. It takes time, it takes effort. There'll be frustration, there'll be setbacks, but there are phenomenal people out there. They're just not working for you because maybe you're not creating that phenomenal structure, that phenomenal culture that they want to be a part of. So yeah, that's
Yeah, there's something that I really want to touch on that you brought up, and only because it is smacked me in the face here in recent days with one of my coaches. You said something about accomplishing the mission of whatever it is you do. My mentor, he sent me a text the other day that said, David, what's your mission and what's your mission statement? And I told him, I said, what is this, the 90s? And the truth of the matter is that it may have been a 90s principle, to create a mission statement. That was the thing. You must have a mission statement. It's got to be this many words. It's got to be whatever. But I'm wondering now, is it time for us to revisit the mission statement as a function of leadership, especially in the culture that we have to create now?
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. And you're right. I think, during the, of course, I was not quite in the professional workforce at that point in the early 90s. But yeah, some MBA out of Harvard came out with some dissertation as part of their degree, and it became, wildfire. But I think that the core difference between that time and that mentality is they created mission statements and mission, words and core value words to put up on the wall, and that's where they stayed, right? It was just something, it was a checkbox that they did as an organization. But now, yes, you have to have that, but now how do you use it every day to not only drive your business and define your business, but attract the people that align with your mission? Because I could go to work for a company that has a phenomenal mission statement that, at that time I may or may not align with it, and I'll work there until it serves me, and then I'll move on to another place. But if I find a company that when I read that job description and I read their core values and I read their mission statement at the bottom of it or at the top of it, I go, I want to work for that company. Holy smokes, that resonates me. It's no different than any other social interaction at this point. Like, we attract people that we are putting out, the things that are attracted to them in their life that align with their mission and their goals and their vision for their life.
That I think is what speaks volumes. As I look at my own company, one of the things that I am realizing is it's not that we lost our mission. We just merely forgot what it was because we got so busy surviving.
Yeah.
Right. That, the bottom line is the bottom line. Without a healthy bottom line, there is no business. And we get that. But if that's the sole purpose of the business, then you're only going to attract, you may not attract anybody for one, but you're only going to attract bottom line oriented people, which may not align with your values. And so I believe what you're saying is you have to almost reestablish your business now, because it may have lost its identity in the last several years.
Oh yeah,
Now,
100%.
so let me get you on the hot seat just a little bit to ask you a question about, okay, I'm 54. Let's say there's somebody in their 50s.
Okay.
They're going to be doing, they see the world has changed around them. Things worked for 30 years, Kale.
Right.
How convince me that I have to change my mindset, and what are some of the, maybe the first step or first two steps I need to take as a business owner or a leader of an organization that's like, dude, it's going to come back around. I mean, if it worked for 30 years, life is cyclical, blah blah blah. What does David need to do first and foremost if he is going to not only survive in this new economy but actually thrive?
Right. Yeah, that is a very good hot seat question. I love it. There are many variables, of course, that apply to all kinds of different situations. Of course, depending the industry and the type of business, and all those kinds of things. But we're gonna talk kind of overarching umbrella of what I think. No matter the industry, no matter the type of product that you're producing, that would apply to a situation like this. And that really is the mindset. It's, I don't want to sound cliche in saying that, or disregard the monumental effort that this may take, but there's probably, when you get to a certain age and you've been doing something for so long, there is a little bit of inherent aversion to new ideas. There's a little bit of inherent aversion to risk. And it's time to get out of that. Understanding, you may have taken that first step of kind of waking up going, my business doesn't look the same as it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and certainly not 30 years ago. What is different now? What is happening now? And you can go even industry specific. If you're not going to trade shows, if you have those for your industry, and seeing what are the new technologies that are hitting your type of business. Maybe you're running an HVAC shop. Are you even staying up to date with the latest types of things that are hitting the marketplace? But then same thing, transitioning of, whatever your pool of type of people, whether they be professional, blue collar, white collar, technical, like how are those people being trained to eventually enter your type of industry in your marketplace? And are you getting in front of that? Or are you just waiting for somebody else to train them, and then you hopefully they show up and just can handle the job to your specifications? But the reality is, it is entirely a mindset thing of how open are you to trying something new, based on the understanding of the old ways, while they may certainly work in certain situations and maybe one or two offs, but in general, moving forward, they're generally not going to keep working and certainly not the way that they were and how you expect them to. I don't know if that's very specific in action steps, but because the reality is it is all up here, and you change this by getting exposed to other ideas. You change this by getting exposed to other thought processes. You mentioned having a mentor. That would probably be my number one recommendation if you're going to start down this path, is find a mentor that suits you and suits where you want to go. Maybe it's somebody that's a little bit older. They've gone through that process already, and you can talk to them. Maybe you even have to pay them a couple bucks to do so, to join their community. But it is worth its weight in gold to keep you out of that old type of thinking.
So we've established that change needs to happen, and it
Right.
needs to start between the ears. We know
Yes.
that. So now we've come to the realization that I've got to get help. I have to, and I, is anybody watching or listening,
Right.
in your business in leadership consulting, tell me what the process is that you take your clients through so that they are best served by what you're trying to teach them.
Right. Wow, that's a great question. Again, there are many levels to it depending on the situation and what they're dealing with. But I will use kind of an example right now that we're seeing a lot is people that are being promoted into a new leadership position. So I'm going to diverge just a little bit from your original question, because I think it's very prevalent right now. And I was just actually DMing with a young gentleman not yesterday, I think the day before yesterday. He's like, hey, I'm a fantastic welder. I'm in this shop of all these welders, and I was promoted to be essentially the shop manager, shop supervisor, because I was the best welder. Like, I don't know how to manage these other 9 welders. I don't know how to create schedules. I don't know how to manage vacation time. I don't know how to manage promotions, like all those types of things. And he said, and basically being hung out to dry by his company, right? Whoever's owns the welding shop or whatever that is. So I guess I would talk to the owner of that shop, because I think this is a very, very, very common tactic that leaders use is, oh, this guy's my best technician over here. He's our technical expert. Everyone goes to him or her for their advice on how to do the things, right? He's our top salesman. So I'm going to make him our sales manager. I'm going to make him our shop lead. I'm going to make him our division head, whatever that is. But then just assume because they're such a great welder or such a great salesman that they know how to handle and train other welders and other salespeople and other customer service reps, right? Whatever that looks like for your industry. And as the leader, as the owner of that company, you are absolutely doing a disservice to that person and your company as a whole, because if you don't understand, it takes an entirely different skill set, a different attitude, and a different approach for the type of person that wants to build teams, that wants to train other people, that wants to be that type of leader in that type of position. So I would really start with, going back, I guess, to your original, I would really start with that process of what does leadership look like to you? Is this something that you even want to do, right? Especially if you're kind of forced into that position as part of your organization or as part of your job. But we'll go back to you are the boss, you are the CEO, you're the owner of your business, so you are the leader. For better or for worse, the reality is understanding that you as the leader have created a culture, right, in your business. There is a culture one way or another. Hopefully you've been purposeful in creating it. How do you align people with that culture? What are you doing to bring people on board with your mission, with your vision, with your core values? And the reality is that starts way before the hiring process even begins, especially for new employees. So it's a process to go through, certainly, depending on what your current situation looks like. But the reality is, I would say first, if you don't have it, just like you were taught by your mentor, you need something that you stand for, your mission statement. You need something that you're going after, your vision statement. You need something that you stand for, your core values. And I find so many people, just like you had thought, they're like, what do I need that for? That's such an antiquated, I can't even say it, an old idea, right? It's something that, everyone, because we all just put it up, poster on the wall, teamwork makes the dream work type of stuff. And then once we get into the actual practicality of it, it just falls by the wayside. But your core values especially should be the number one filter that you're doing everything through. How you're leading people, how you're getting clients, how you're servicing your customers, how you're attracting new hires. The entirety should be all based on your core values.
Um,
Does that
that was
help, or was that a little?
that was very helpful, and one of the things that struck me as you were saying it, and I want to bring this up. You know, I'm willing to invest in me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whatever it is, and most, I think a lot of leaders are. They're willing to invest in themselves, in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the importance of training down the line. So a lot
Yeah.
of time, you said something when you were talking about the welder that was promoted, or a salesperson that's promoted to sales manager, and they're not given the tools because they've never had to use those types of tools. Let's
Right.
talk about the importance of training, and also the importance of outside training versus inside training, meaning bringing in an outside person versus internally doing training.
Right.
Because
Right.
I think it does start with the leadership. The leadership has to make training a priority consistently. Don't bring in some guy, you know, don't bring in an evangelist that stirs the waters and not have a pastor there to deal with the fallout. You know what I mean?
Right.
So talk about the
Right.
importance of training, not only from the top person in leadership, but all the way down through every employee and team member.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great idea and concept that's so often overlooked, because you're right. I think a lot of business people, they realize, I got this problem, there's a fire going on, where's the fire extinguisher? I'll hire this leadership coach, or I'll hire this mentor of some sort that's going to fix X, Y, and Z, this consultant, right? It's kind of how the whole thing of idea of consultancy came in. Like, I've got this problem, hire the expert, he comes, boom, 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 done, and go on as business as usual, right? Completely negating what led to the problem. And that's what we're seeing a lot now today. We're even seeing people that they recognize, you may have that mid-level manager, that mid-level supervisor, they recognize this is a problem, and they reach out to me, they reach out to other leadership coaches, but then as a whole, the business says, well, we can't afford that, or because you don't get that direct ROI. That's a whole nother issue. But going back to what you were talking about as far as down the line is, you have to understand the job. What is the job of a leader? Right? It's easy to say, the textbook, the Harvard MBA will say, well, it's organizational leadership. It's you're providing that mission, you're providing the direction, and you're giving the orders to execute, to accomplish your tasks, right? But that's, to me at least, that's a very shallow perspective, and it's a very one-off, self-serving definition of leadership. The real job of leaders is to create other leaders. That's what you're doing. You are growing other leaders. You become the de facto mentor to other people in your organization. Now, you absolutely cannot, as your company grows, be the leader and the mentor to 50 different people. Like, you can be that figurehead and the one ultimately responsible, but you cannot be that person to all of your people, especially as you're growing in larger organizations. So you need to create other leaders. And that means instilling them those types of skills, whether it be communication, empathy, relating to people, and how to talk and build that culture, going back to the culture piece. So that it's hugely critical to understand that flow of it, because just like anything else, we're only one generation away from complete failure. And if we continue to not train and teach leaders down your line as you get older, amidst all the other things you've got going on, you're just one generation away from it going away, right? And that's what we're seeing, and that's what I experienced, especially in the military, a lot, is that it was just a lost art.
So,
Did that answer your question?
I'm sure it did.
Okay.
No, really and truly, yeah. This is my takeaway, and listeners, viewers. Number one, you got to know what you stand for.
Yeah.
Number two, you've got to embrace that you are a leader and skill up your leadership.
Yeah.
And number three, you have to create other leaders by providing structure and training and a culture of training and skilling up for them to not necessarily replace you, but augment you to where there is legacy beyond
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Would that be a pretty accurate assessment of what the mindset of a leader needs to be in this day and age?
Yeah, absolutely. And the kicker about it is, that can be an absolutely difficult mindset to have, especially if you're say a mid-level leader or mid-level manager or division head in a larger corporation. Like, and that's certainly what I found in the military, is you were threatened by people that were better at leadership than you, or they were on their coming up, and they became a threat to you. And that's very difficult to deal with. It's certainly a very personal issue that you have to deal with as a leader. I guess we're talking a little bit more to the business owners and entrepreneur type of a situation, but corporate structures is, it has a whole different set of considerations and things to account for as far as the leadership goes. But for that, I would, talking specifically to that corporate kind of structure, I would kind of lean towards, yes, your job still is to make other leaders. You can't, as you should be kind of climbing that corporate structure yourself, you should be training and teaching people to come behind you. But also, your job as a leader, one of my mentors, Brandon Dawson, said very clearly, he's like, my job as a leader is to make other people's jobs easy. Like, that's what you do. Provide them the tools, the resources, the education, the training that they need to be successful at their job. That's part of your job as a leader too.
So, if I'm a leader, whether I'm mid-level, high-level, entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, Kale, you've got me. I need to follow in your footsteps. I need the structures. I need the what would be my first step if I'm like raising my hand saying I want to work with Kale? What are some of the ways that people can work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can certainly go to kalehouser.com. So KaleHouser.com. You can scroll down. You, of course, learn a little bit about me and my wife. I should mention my wife, Liz Houser, is my co-founder, and she helps out with our business. And you can book a call with us and we can talk, what your situation is, what you're dealing with, and how we can help you. If you are in that kind of new leader position, maybe going back to the welder example, you can go to kalehouserleadership.com/mistakes. So kalehouserleadership.com/mistakes. And I have a free PDF ebook there about the 10 biggest mistakes every new leader makes and how to avoid them. So it's just kind of a little guide of, certainly it's not a 400-page dissertation or anything, but it's something to be aware of, hey, are you making some of these mistakes in your journey, especially if you start out, kind of based on no one's kind of taught you this. I'm a public school kid. I never took leadership classes. Even as I joined the military, there was, despite the formality of the leadership type of training, it was just managerial training and how to, run a schedule and get people to, show up and schedule leave and all that kind of stuff, not actual leadership. Yeah. So those would be the two ways.
That is awesome. And yeah, I'd say follow him on all of his socials, which
Yep.
you can get to from kalehouser.com.
Yep.
Kale, this has been a great conversation. It's been eye-opening for me, as well as, and you and I have, like I said at the beginning, have a lot of similar views when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for bringing, to sound like John Lee Dumas, bringing the fire to our interview today. Again, guys, I just want to encourage you, follow Kale wherever he's at. Go to kalehouser.com, kalehouserleadership.com/mistakes. And let's all be better leaders, because this is what I know. Applied knowledge is power. God bless y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.